So we're here today chatting with Joe Barros, who is the producing artistic director at New York Theater Barn in New York. So Joe, could you start out by talking to us a little bit about your background in the business and what eventually led you to New York Theater Barn?
Sure. So I'm a director and a choreographer. I've been the artistic director of New York Theater Barn since 2007. I was the associate director of Gigi on Broadway in 2015, and I was recently the associate director of the long-running hit Cagney. And I'm currently working on a new rock musical off Broadway with Amy Engelhart called Bastard Jones, which is about young people who are thrown out of their homes for being themselves, and all of the proceeds are going to the Cyndi Lauper True Colors Fund. It's a very exciting new piece written by Amy and Marcusito. So I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, same time zone as NMI, and I went to the Hart School of Music for Musical Theater in Connecticut. I wanted to be close to Boston and New York, to see my friends and to be near those theater scenes. While at the Hart School, we did new musical plays. One of those shows was when I was a sophomore, actually a junior, called I Married Wyatt Earp, an all-female musical about the wife of Wyatt Earp, who was a Jewish wife, a Jewish woman from San Francisco who traveled to Tombstone, met and fell in love with Wyatt Earp. I loved this sense of adventure. I'd never seen a show like it. The score is by Michelle Browerman and Sheila Ray and Tom West. Anyway, this show really inspired me to want to create a place for new work. There were some other pieces that excited me. Vanishing Point by Rob Hartman that I met him through this NYU team, and it was about Amy Semple McPherson, Agatha Christie, and Amelia Earhart. And so all of these shows kept coming to me, and I wanted to create a place. So a friend of mine who is a set designer, David Rigler, and we created this company in 2007 to create a platform for writers to tell untold stories. And so we ended up producing I Married Wyatt Earp off Broadway in collaboration with Prospect Theater Company. And then I raised funds recently for the writers to return to the studio to rewrite the show. It's now called The Belle of Tombstone. And we just did a concert at the Museum of Jewish Heritage with Karen Mason and Heather McRae. And so for me, the story's never over until the writers feel like, they've had time to really bring their story to life. And then one of our other big projects that we are really proud of is a new musical called Small Town Story, which I conceived and the company commissioned about a conservative Texas high school that's doing the musical Rent and how it gets canceled and how the students put it on themselves. And it's about the generation gap between parents and children and how we are sheltering our heroes of tomorrow from the things that they already know. And it's about trust and listening.
Oh, yeah. So you've got lots of projects going on. We had an interview. We had an interview a little bit earlier with Amy Engelhart, and we talked about Bastard Jones because we've worked with Amy out here at NMI several times, and she sang your praises for that show, and it seems like that show is doing an amazing job. Everybody's really enjoying it. And the critics have been very kind to it, and the whole model for the proceeds going to the charity is just a fantastic model that we already talked to Amy about. That's really very exciting, and I think that you are quite interested in all those sorts of social causes, which is why your show is in that arena as well. Is that what motivates you a lot when you're looking for new shows and working on new shows?
Sure. Ultimately, these stories have a power beyond just theater. I think ultimately most of the stories that we're telling really sort of want to ignite and spark social change and want to bring communities together, obviously for the greater good. And this is a time in history where more so than ever, we need to tell stories that open our minds.
Fantastic. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about how things work at New York Theater Barn? What is your season like? What kind of shows are you, and at what level are you able to do shows, readings, concerts, full productions? How does all that work at New York Theater Barn?
Sure. So I Married Wyatt Earp was a big exception. It's one of our biggest projects. We co-produced it with Prospect Theater Company at 59 East 59th Street Theaters off Broadway. But we're primarily a developmental house that serves writers and all artists really. We have 3 specific platforms that we follow. We have our new work series, our choreography lab, and then residencies. And then from each residency, a show builds. So usually the show starts in the new work series, which is sort of our first date with a writer. And usually that show has never been done anywhere. In some cases it has, but we call them pre-premieres of new musicals. Every other month, we bring together 2 new musicals. They're strategically partnered together. Each show does 35 minutes, and it's to a live and virtual audience. And we now do 2 shows because we don't have enough space to do one. We began at the Daryl Roth Theater in 2007 when we launched, and they liked the work that we did, so they invited us back every month. And we've since moved to the Cell, which is our creative home, which is where Bastard Jones is playing. It's a really unique 2-story, basically the carriage house of a brownstone, and it's a big white box. We do a lot of work there. So for the past 10 years, we've been doing our new work series, and then things sort of grow and evolve from there. We also have the Choreography Lab, which is the only platform for writers and choreographers to create movement for new musicals during incubation. So we do that every other month as well. It's curated by Avital Asulin, who is a choreographer in the field, and we've developed a lot of the musicals that have come out of the new work series through there, or they've started in the Choreography Lab and moved over. When we, really gel with a show and a writing team and we're really invested in what they're doing, we continue on to what we call our residencies. So there's a show with us right now called Sam's Room, which is in residency because Sam's Room won our annual Impact Award, which we just started last year. And that goes to a show that really had its message had a special impact on our community, as well as, that's basically it. But it's about a nonverbal special needs man who is trapped in his body, and he's just really yearning, searching for a way to communicate with the outside world. It's created by four collaborators, 2 of which have written the score. One is the lead actor and the other is the director. And they've sort of created it through forensic storytelling. It takes place in 1989, so the score is very 80s, early 90s rock band. And when you go inside Sam's room, he is the rock star of his own mind, and he can communicate with the audience, but then he does retreat back to the place where he is nonverbal and can't communicate.
Oh, very interesting. That's a very interesting arena. Now, a moment ago, Joe, you mentioned something about having audiences and virtual audiences. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by a virtual audience and how that works?
Yeah, so in some cases we do live streaming, but basically for the new work series, since it's a concert and we don't fall under sort of any equity code because it's for one night, we're able to film it because it is a concert. We have a media release that everybody signs so that, it's all kosher. But if the material is what the writers were hoping for and everyone signs off and approves it, almost everything that we create lives on online, with the exception of a production. We would just have B-roll, but so it helps the writers to have archive. It helps the actors to promote their work. And then it also gets the word out even more all around the world about what we're doing. And we have, people requesting music all the time from different writers. And so that's what it's really about. And recently we now have a bunch of colleges who like what we're doing and want, working with Michigan State University, where I do a lot of work to sort of create a pipeline where we can bring new work, expose musical theater majors to more new work. And so they can create relationships with writers. So when they move to New York, that writer already has someone who's excited about their work, who is hungry to be in a concert or a reading or a workshop. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're working very hard to increase the exposure of the shows to lots of different audiences. Now, in terms of a concert, when you call it a concert, what do you have to do less than the full book of the musical in order to qualify as a concert as far as the unions are concerned? Or because it's one night, are you able to do the entire show?
We usually do about 35 or 40 minutes. It's sort of like, well, for lack of a better, lack of a better phrase, it's basically like a mini NAMT presentation.
Right, right.
That's sort of how that's sort of how it grew. I mean, that really inspired us.
Right. So NAMT being, of course, the National Alliance for Musical Theater, and you and I have been together a couple of times on the selection committee that chooses the shows that are going to get those 45-minute showcases at NAMT, and they really are a rather amazing way for writers to get to see their work and to get to expose it to other people. So I can understand why you were inspired to create something like that.
Totally. NAMT is a great organization, and their festival is a great model. And what's very exciting is actually Sam's Room, the show I just mentioned, is in this year's festival.
Oh, that is exciting. Great. So everybody will get a chance to see it in October when it gets showcased at the festival.
Absolutely. And what's exciting is that following the festival, we will produce a developmental workshop, developmental production, which will feel very much like a workshop at the Cell. So, what's great is the show has really been a part of our trajectory. It's been in the Newark series. It will probably be in the Choreography Lab at some point, and now it's in residency with us, and we're continuing to bring this untold story to life.
Right. So when you get interested in a show, you really take it under your wing and nurture it through as many layers as you can towards production.
Absolutely. And, furthermore, a lot of our shows are like underdog shows that have themes and characters that are really, minorities in our world. Diversity is a big theme in Bastard Jones, and, diversity is a big theme in our company. And so, we just go outside of the box for everything.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, when you're putting together these 35-minute showcases, are you very much involved in helping the writers figure out exactly what that cut should be? We've been having this conversation with a couple other people about the importance and the difficulty of actually trying to figure out which part of the show to showcase and how much a writer can learn from that process.
Totally. Every show is different. Sometimes we're able to do a truncation of the whole show. Sometimes we're just able to do a segment. We talk about the different things that work better. More music than book actually works really well in that format, but sometimes writers are able to find a way to make really cinematic cuts so that it really flows. We just did a show called Martian Child, based on a novel about a man, a single gay dad who adopts a young boy who thinks he's from Mars. And the director, Sammy Canold, who's 22, she's the associate up in Massachusetts. She had a big, heavy hand working with the writers to sort of help them figure out what would be the best cut to do. And then what we find is that writers learn a lot about their show by having to truncate and tell the best parts. And they end up going back and rewriting a lot of it based on the feedback, which is great.
Yeah, I think it's a great learning opportunity for them. Now, Joe, I think one of the most unique things that you offer, besides all of the other programs at New York Theater Barn, is that ability to work on movement and choreography at such an early stage of development. I'm not sure I've heard of any other company that's able to do that. It's a tricky thing to do, I imagine, when a show is in its nascent form. How do you go about that? How do you go about bringing the choreography, the movement of the show to life at such an early stage when the show is just developing?
Yeah, every show is different, as you know, and every show needs something different. So right now, basically, we're our next Choreography Lab is in September, and all 4 pieces will be from a different musical. And so right now what we're doing is we're working with the writers to find the right choreographer. So for instance, a show I'm really excited about that we're going to be doing in the spring is called Crossing Over. It is written by 2 women. And it is about a young girl in an Amish community who basically escapes. She's a teenager. She escapes this community, and she meets this young black preacher who escaped the world of gangs and gang violence. And what you find is that these 2 people are more alike than different. They both come from like a cult world. And so they find magic in their own world that they create together. And it's very exciting. And so we are actually looking for a choreographer of color right now to bring that story to life, especially since both writers are white, but they are women in their 50s, which we're very excited about. So we're working on that. So that will be in the Choreography Lab before it's in the New Work series. But another scenario for the Choreography Lab is we might have one show that dominates the entire lab, and 4 different choreographers get to tackle 4 different moments from the show.
Oh,
so that's what we had. Yeah, that's what we had earlier this year when we did a show called Days of Rage, which brings the Black Panthers together with the Weathermen Underground, who were similar organizations, and their involvement in Chicago at the time, and how the 2 groups, one primarily Black and the other primarily white, how they came together, how they struggle with differences, and how they ultimately discover that they want the same thing. And that is written by a white girl and a Korean girl. So we brought in choreographers of all different shapes, colors, and sizes. And in some cases we performed with the track, and in some cases we taught the dancers the vocal part, and it was very exciting.
Oh, that does sound really interesting. Now, can you talk us through your submission process? If a writer or writing team wants to submit something to you, what is that process, and what are you looking for ultimately for the various different opportunities that you can provide for shows?
Sure. So we have a submission process for the Choreography Lab for dancers and for choreographers. That's on our website under our Choreography Lab dropdown. Same with the New Work series. We have a bunch of questions we ask. Ultimately, we want to know why you've written this piece and why now, and how it fits in with our mission of telling untold stories. Beyond just what's on the page and what's exciting and inspiring is relationships and how we all connect. And so when someone comes to us with a new show and we already have a relationship with them, obviously our antenna are up and we're excited to see what they've got. So obviously someone who already has a relationship with us, we're looking at their work twice over because we already know them and we already believe in them, obviously. But usually I'm the most excited when I'm like, I don't know this story at all. Which was so exciting about that show Crossing Over, about the Amish girl and the preacher from the gang. I'd never heard of anything like that. And to blend the worlds of like hip hop and Amish culture, I thought was just genius, and have this powerful young female protagonist. It's important right now. Or like a musical about Ryan White. When I tell people about Ryan White, the teenage hemophiliac who contracted AIDS in the 80s and became the poster child for AIDS, a lot of people don't know the story. My grandparents died of AIDS in the 80s. My grandfather had a blood transfusion, gave it to my grandmother. So Ryan White's story is like a part of me, and it excites me to tell more people about that. A new musical we just worked on called Pretty to the Bone, about a family who's struggling with their daughter's eating disorder. It's not a musical about eating disorders. It's a musical about how people suffer from the choices that other people make. And obviously the theme of addiction. We're about to work on another show called Eastbound, started at the Musical Theater Factory, which is about an Asian American boy who is adopted, who has cancer, undergoes chemotherapy, it doesn't work. So he has to travel to China to find a blood relative for a bone marrow transplant. It's like, to me, it's like, that is so exciting because that is so interesting to me, that is so real, but those aren't the kinds of stories that people are telling.
Well, that's exciting. A lot of interesting stories. Joe, I want to ask you a question that we've been asking everyone we've been talking to. If this is a fantasy question, so you can put on your imagination cap. If you were to wake up tomorrow morning and suddenly find you'd been gifted with $100 million earmarked for the development of new musicals, how would you want to spend that money?
I think I would first try to purchase or rent a permanent space, a permanent home that is not necessarily a theater, but that is a chameleonic space that can morph to do all the developmental things we want to do, and to do all of the production things that we want to do, but that a space where any show can morph and be what it wants to be rather than morph to our space. And the second thing I would do is I would fund all of the other institutions around us that are currently supporting us or that I want to support us, because the more we can, it's sort of like a Buddhist mindset. The more we can give the people that are helping us, the better we're going to be, because the better off we're going to be from the work that they do. So that's young conservatory programs, other nonprofits, programs like the National Alliance for Musical Theater, the Alliance of Resident Theaters New York, incredible organizations that give back and do things for us. And without them, we wouldn't be able to have half of the grants and the opportunities that we have.
That's a fantastic idea, Joe. I think you're the first one we've spoken to who thought of that idea of spreading it around to other organizations and service organizations in order to help them do their job, because that it may sound altruistic, but it's ultimately going to help you, because then they'll be able to help you more. That's a great approach. To wrap up, I'd like to ask one last question, which is a two-part question. I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you think is the future of musical theater, and if you were to give advice to the writers who are writing the musicals of tomorrow, what would you want to tell them?
Sure. I would say the future of musical theater is completely outside of the box. It's people like Evan Ruggiero, who I'm working with on Bastard Jones, who has one leg. It's Ali B. Gorey, who's in Bastard Jones, who's legally blind. It's outside of the box. And casting these people in roles that support their disability, and in roles where they're being cast just like anybody else because they're talented and they're magical. And they're special because they have superpowers, and they can only make our stories better. So for me, I think that the future is right in front of us. It's all of these amazing people. And what I'd like to tell writers of tomorrow about, I think just keep writing what you know, keep writing what you love, tell your story, believe in yourself, and do everything beyond writing. Learn about the world. Take an acting class, take a dance class, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Because ultimately what I always tell actors is when you slip into someone else's skin, you learn the most about yourself. And I think that goes for every field.
Oh, that's fantastic, Joe. Thank you. That's great advice. I really appreciate that you chatted with us. We'll be looking forward to seeing what comes next out of New York Theater Barn and all of your projects. And thank you so much. It was great to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me this morning. This was great. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.